I didn't look particularly good in any of that shit. Terrible. I look terrible.
Good morning.
Good morning, Doug.
Okay, today we are on 23a at the very top, and we're quoting the Mishnah that said, how many people read on each day, read the Torah. So B'Yom Tov Chamisha, on holidays is five people. Yom Kippurim Shisha, Yom Kippur is 6. Masnisin Mai. So, oh, and by the way, the Mishnah also said no more and no less on these days. Whose opinion is the Mishnah following? Lo Rabbi Shmuel, lo Rabbi Akiva. Neither Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva. What is that? The Tanya. We have Brisa. B'Yom Tov Chamisha, B'Yom Kippurim Shisha, U'B'Shabbat Shiva. On Yom Tov 5, Yom Kippur 6, Shabbos 7. Ein pochasin mehen ve'en mosifin alein. No more and no less. Diva Rabbi Shmuel. That's what Rabbi Shmuel says. The Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva says, B'Yom Tov Chamisha, B'Yom Kippurim Shiva, B'Shabbat Shisha. On Yom Tov 5, Yom Kippur is 7, and Shabbos is 6. So those are reversed. Ein pochasim mehem, no less. Aval mosifin alehem. But you can have more, and that's our practice on Shabbos. You may have been to shuls where most shuls will allow at least one extra reader on Shabbos, and some will allow multiple extra ones. And so here Rabbi Akiva is saying apparently for all of these, Yatov, Yom Kippur, and Shabbos, you can increase the number. Money. So who's our Mishnah? Rabbi Shmuel, Kasha Tosefes. Rabbi Shmuel says no more and no less, but our Mishnah said, our Mishnah did allow, I misspoke before. Our Mishnah does allow more on Shabbos, Yom Kippur, and Yantiv. So it gets the numbers right, but our Mishnah allows extras and Rabbi Shmuel does not. So our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva, Kasha Shisha Shiva. Rabbi Akiva allows more, but he switches Yom Kippur and Shabbos. He has 7 on Yom Kippur and 6 on Shabbos, where our Mishnah has it the other way around. So it's not Rabbi Akiva either. So who does our Mishnah accord with? Amar Rava, Tana Dvei Rabbi Shmuel. It is a student of Rabbi Shmuel, or a Tana from the school of Rabbi Shmuel. The Tana Dvei Rabbi Shmuel. There's a brisa from there. B'Yom Tov Chamisha, B'Yom Kippurim Shisha, B'Shabbat Shiva, Ein Pochasin Mehem Vol Mosifin Alehem Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. So this quotes Rabbi Shmuel as saying exactly like our Mishnah. 5, 6, and 7, like our Mishnah, on Yom Tov, Yom Kippur, and Shabbos, and you can add. So Kasha Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Shmuel. So doesn't that contradict what we said before about Rabbi Shmuel? So now you've solved one problem. You said, okay, our Mishnah is like Rabbi Shmuel, but it doesn't accord with the previous statement that we saw of Rabbi Shmuel. So Gemara says, Trei Tanai, leave it Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel had his opinion. It's a dispute in what Rabbi Shmuel's opinion was. So our Mishnah takes one side of that dispute and takes Rabbi Shmuel's position that it knows of, and the other brisa has a different position ascribed to Rabbi Shmuel. So that doesn't really resolve the problem; it just restates it. But but it's certainly not the first argument over positions that the Gemara has. Now, what about the following brisa? Who does this accord with? B'Yom Tov ma'achrin lavo u'mamarin lotzei. So it's kind of a rule of thumb or an aphorism, or you would call it exactly as follows: on Yom Tov you come late, and you leave early. Okay, not I don't think it means that you should come after the beginning of the services or leaving before the end. It means that you start later and you finish earlier. Yom Kippurim, Mamarin Lavo, Menachin, let's say. So on Yom Kippur, you start early and finish late. Shabbos, Mamarin Lavo, Mamarin, let's say. So on Shabbos, you come early and finish early. What does that mean? So the Gemara is going to try and ascribe this Lema Rabbi Akiva. They easily got Rabbi Yisera. So according to Rabbi Akiva, on Yontiv you can start later and finish earlier because there are only 5 readers. On Yom Kippur, you start late. You start early and finish late because there are the most readers. There's 7, right? And that would be Rabbi Akiva's view that on Yom Kippur there are 7. And on Shabbos, you can start early, but you can finish early because there are 6 readers, according to Rabbi Akiva, right? So it's like a middle position. Maybe that's what this is about, like how many Torah readers there are that stretches out or shrinks the length of the service. So Gemara says, I feel like Rabbi Yishmael. No, you can say Rabbi Yishmael. We're not talking about how much is going on in the shul, right? How much Torah reading there is. We're talking about what's going on outside the shul, right? On Yom Tov and Shabbos, why do you come later? Why do you start later? Because not on Shabbos. On Yom Tov, why do you start late? Because you're busy preparing kiddush, right? Preparing lunch, like you got to prepare some food. On Shabbos and Yom Kippur, there's no food to prepare, right? Shabbos you can't cook. Yom Kippur, even if you could, there's nothing, you can't eat it. So that's why on Yom Tov you start. You start late and finish early because you're both preparing the food early and then you want to go home and eat it after shul. So you finish early. On Yom Kippur, there's no food at all, right? There's no preparing, there's no eating. So you can come early and finish late. And on Shabbos, there's no preparation. So you start late, but you finish early because you want to go home and have lunch. Okay. So that Bryce has nothing to do with Torah reading. So now we're going to take a step back and consider what's the idea of all these different numbers of Torah readers. What is the symbolism, I guess you would say, of the 3, 5, and 7 on the different days? Monday, Thursday, Yom Tov, and Shabbos. What does that remind us of? Rabbi Yitzchak and somebody else had an argument. Umanu, and who is that other person? Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. This is kind of an editorial comment that whoever, I guess, said this couldn't remember or didn't know who was the other party. And the editorial comment says that, by the way, it was Rabbi Shimon, Megilah, or some say Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi v'chad dimei umanu Rabbi Yitzchak ben Nachmani. Some say that the known one was Rabbi Shimon and the unknown one that the editorial comment adds is Rabbi Yitzchak. Megilah, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, and some say that the other person was a different Rabbi Shmuel. Anyway, clearly it's unclear who said these things, but here are the 2 views of what the symbolism is. One says the 3 is the 3, 5, and 7 corresponds to the bracha that the Kohanim give, as prescribed in the Torah. So the Torah says, here's how you bless the people. How the Kohanim bless the people, and there's 3 verses made up of 3, 5, and 7 words. Yivarech Hashem v'yishmerecha is 3. Ya'er Hashem panav elecha v'yichunecha is 5. Yisah Hashem panav elecha v'yasem v'chashalom is 7 words. So that's the 3, 5, and 7. That's the symbolism there. L'chanamar, and the other view is Keneged Shlosha Shomer Asaf, Chamisha Me Roe Pnei HaMelech, and Shiva Roe Pnei HaMelech. It's the numbers that are given as the number of attendants of Ahashverosh in the Megilah, right? There's like 3 different kinds of officials. One is the Shomer Asaf, which are listed as 3. Then there are those who are the inner circle who see the king regularly. There were 5 of them, and then there's another group of people who see the king regularly. That's 7 people are listed. Now, why King Ahashverosh? There's a mystical undertone or interpretation, I guess, to Esther, that although God's name is not mentioned in Esther, but some see the king, when it refers to Achashverosh, sometimes refers to him as the king, the anonymous king. So there's kind of a mystical layer there of the king being God. So, there's these 3 people, 5 people, and 7 people who have access to God or to the king, who we understand to be God. So that's the basis for the 3, 5, and 7. Okay, it's a little obtuse. Anyway, Abai, so Abai said, Abai says, how come you never told me this before? Amalei, so Rabbi Yosef said to him, well, how have you done? It's truth to lay. I didn't know you wanted to know. I mean, look, what did you ever ask me anything and I failed to tell you? If you want to know, you should ask. I haven't taught you everything in the world. A little, cute little aside. Yaakov Mina Rabbi Yehuda. Yaakov Mina said to Rabbi Yehuda, Hani Shisha Yom Kippurim Knegani. Okay, we have symbolism for 3, 5, and 7. What about the 6 on Yom Kippur? Malay said, Kneged Shisha Sha'amdu Mimino Shal Ezra V'Shisha Mismalo. The book of Ezra, when Ezra appeared at in a public gathering, so there were 6 officials to his right and 6 to his left. Shanamar, the proof text is Vayamod Ezra Sofar al Migdal Ha'etz Asher Asul L'Davar. Ezra stood on the wooden platform. Vayamod Etzlo, and next to him were Matisia, Veshema, Va'anaya, V'Uriya, V'Chilkiya, V'Maasei al Yamino. These 6 people on his right. Mismalo, and on his left, Pedaya, Mishael, Malkiya, V'Chusha, V'Chashbadana, Zachariah, Meshulam. These 6 other people on his left. Hane Shiva Havu. Wait, it sounds like there were 7 listed next to Ezra on his left, right? Pedaya, Mishael, Malkiya, Husham, Hashbadna, Zachariah, Meshulam. That's 7. My answer is Hainu Zachariah, Hainu Meshulam. Zachariah Meshulam is one person. Like he was known by a double name. But Micro Meshulam, why was he called Meshulam? To Mishalim Ba'ovde. He was complete. Meshulam comes from the root Shalem, complete. So he was a complete person. He was completely righteous. Okay, so that's the symbolism of 6. Tanarabah. Hakol only the minyan shiva. Anybody can be one of these 7 people that are called to the Torah on Shabbat, that read from the Torah on Shabbos. Afilu katan, afilu isha, even a minor and even a woman. Aval amru chachamim, but the rabbi said, isha lo tikra b'Torah mipnei kvod tzibur. A woman should not read the Torah, not because she's not eligible, but because it's disrespectful to the congregation, which is Rashi. I think the general understanding of this is that it's like it looks like there aren't any men who are literate, right? Aren't any men who can read the Torah if a woman is reading. So it's this is a central passage in the contemporary debate over should women, or the role of women in the synagogue, and should women read from the Torah. If it's, I think it is, what one could easily understand that this might not apply in contemporary times of mass literacy, but I'm certainly not qualified to get into a longer discussion of the ins and outs of this and related passages. Just putting it there that this is a key passage in that discussion. They asked Maftir, and by the way, it's also interesting that minors can read from the Torah. So they asked Maftir Moshe al Luminyan. So that we have the Maftir, which is the last Aliyah, who reads from the prophets, so that reads the Haftarah after the Torah reading. So does that count for one of the 7? Right, the last guy who reads who reads the Haftarah, first he reads from the Torah. Does that count as one of the 7, or is that extra? There's a dispute between these 2. One says it counts, and one says it doesn't count. Monday Amar, the one who says it counts the Hakari. Well, he reads the Torah, right? I mean, why would you not count it? Monday Amar Eno, the one who says no, it doesn't count. Why? Kedula, because of Ula's opinion. Ula said, why in the first place is the guy who's reading from the prophets? Why does he also read from the Torah before he starts the prophets? Torah, to honor the Torah. So in other words, you're not like putting aside the Torah and now we'll read from the real thing, the prophets. No, it's like showing that even the guy who reads from the prophets, first the primacy is the Torah that you read from, and then you read from the prophets. His act of reading from the Torah is not really intended to be a Torah reading. It's just a kind of a nod towards the Torah, but really his function is to read from the prophets. The Kevan Mishum Torah, since that is the reason, so that wouldn't count. That's not his intention to count as part of the official Torah reading. They asked, they asked that the rule is that the Haftarah should not be less than 21 verses. Keneged Shiva Shekaru B'Torah, which would be the minimum Torah reading, because if each of the seven, if there's a minimum of 3 per reader, and there are 7 readers, so that's 21. So the Haftarah should also, to balance it, should be not less than 21. If that's true, that you don't count the Maftir 7 readers, but he's an 8th, Estrin Ba'arba. So then really there's 8 readers, and also has to be, that would be 24. So the Masters came to Bishum Kvod Torah, who Kenegdo Name Lobai. Oh, that's easy to get out of. It's like, okay, the same thing. The last person, the Maftir, that doesn't really count because he's not an official. It's not an official reading. It's just a courtesy.
Question: when we read from the Torah on Monday and Thursday, is it from the previous Shabbos or the Shabbos going forward?
The one coming up.
The one coming up.
Yeah, and in fact, when we read on Shabbos afternoon, it's also from the one coming up, not from the one that was read in the.
Okay.
Maskif LaRava, so Rava asked, I can show you a Haftarah that's less than 21, which is the Haftarah of Parshas Tzav, which is only 17 verses, less than 21, Ukrina, and yet we read it. Whereas the Shani Hasam, that's different. To Solik Inya, because there we're reading a whole topic, right? It happens to be that topic concludes in 17 verses. So it is a full unit, and you don't have to worry about how many verses are in it. So wait a minute, I can show you an example where you read less than 21, even though it's not the full unit. Amar Shmuel said, many times I was with Rabbi Yochanan. And once in reading the Haftarah, once they got to after they'd read 10 verses, Amar Lanasiku, he said, that's enough. You don't have to read anymore. So that's 10 is less than 21. What's going on here? Where there is a translator, that's different. So it seems that the practice was that the reader would read a verse and then there would be a translator, because if people weren't Hebrew speakers, they wouldn't understand what's going on. So there was an interpreter, a translator, who would repeat the verse by verse, who would repeat it in the vernacular. So then it would take a lot longer, right? It would take a lot longer, so he didn't want to trouble people, so that the keeping people for longer than necessary in shul trumped the idea of 21 verses. So the 21 verses, according to Rabbi Yochanan, will only apply where there is no translator. The Tanya of Tachifa Rashua or Tachifatat, Shanu El Magam Shem Turgaman. That's only the 21 verse rule for the Haftarah is only when there's no interpreter, translator. Turgaman Posek, but if there is, then you can do less than 20. Okay, next Mishnah. So the Mishnah is going to discuss the things for which you need to have a minyan of 10 adult males. Okay, of 10 people. The first one is a little unclear. In Parsin al Shema, you can't. So Parsin usually means to divide something, to break something. So a common explanation here is let's say you come late to shul, right? And they've already finished the part of that requires so. So the structure of the morning prayer is the liturgy is first you have Psuke de Zimra. There's the introductory part. Then you have Birchas Kriyas Shema. You have the Shema and the bracha, two brachas before and one bracha after, and then you have the Amidah. So we're talking about the Shema part, and that includes a call and response. Baruch Hu Hashem HaMavarach, Baruch Hashem HaMavarach, a call and response, and that is that is not said if you're praying as an individual, but if you're in a minyan, then you do say that. So what happens? Somebody comes late and misses that part. So it seems like he wants to catch up. There is a minyan of people there, right? But they've already said this, so he can follow up and say it, and they respond. So he's kind of catching up. So that you can only do when there's a minyan. And other things, ain't over in Lifnei Atev, other repetition of the Shemona Esrei, of the Amidah. Literally, it means you don't pass before the ark, right? But it means the person stands up as the leader and repeats the Amidah. Ain't no sinas kapayim, the literally raising of the hands. That means the bracha of the Kohanim, right? The Ein Korin B'Torah, nor do we do Torah reading. Ein Maftirim B'Naveh, nor the prophets reading. The Ein Osin Mama the Moshav. This is having to do with if you ever been to a funeral. So at the conclusion, the mourners walk between two rows of people, and there's a formula to comfort them. That seems to be a remnant of this more elaborate procedure that was in the time of the Gemara called Mamad Moshav. They would be standing and sitting, and it's I don't know. I don't remember if the Gemara is going to get into the details, but there's some kind of ceremony for the mourners that requires a minyan. You don't say the bracha of the mourners, which I don't think that is a current practice, as far as I know, but there was this bracha that the mourners would make, and that has to be done at a minyan. Or the consoling the mourners. So this is what I was referring to before. After the funeral, the consoling of the mourners between the two rows of people. Not clear why that should need a minyan. Ubirchas chasanim, the blessing for a groom, which means like what we call the Sheva Brachos at a wedding, right? The 7 blessings are recited under the chuppah, and also at any celebratory meal in the week following the wedding. So that requires a minyan. Then mezamnin b'shem, and you also require it for when someone leads a group in the bracha after meals and benching. If there's a minyan, then God's name is invoked in that introduction. Otherwise, you leave that out. Sorry, you don't do any of these things if there's less than 10. Uvakarkos, and also if in the evaluation of property. So this refers to when someone donates property to the temple, then or the value of property, then it has to be assessed, right? How much is this worth? And that's how much you have to give to the temple. That has to be done with Tisha V'Kohen, 9 men and 9 people plus at least 1 Kohen. V'Adam Kayosevah. And also, when someone donates the value of a person, you also need a minyan. Well, the Gemara will discuss what that's talking about. Minani Milei. So where do we get all this from? Why do all these things require a minyan? Yamakra, because the Torah says, "V'niktashti b'toch b'nei Israel." God says, "I will be sanctified among the people of Israel." That tells us that anything that is sanctification requires 10. My mashma. So where do you get that from? It says among the people of Israel. It doesn't say among 10 people of Israel. Where does the number 10 come from? So that comes from another verse. Because of the use of the word toch, amongst the people of Israel. Okay, and that word toch, amongst, is used somewhere else. Here it says, "I will be sanctified among the people of Israel." In the story of Korach, God says to Moshe, "Separate yourself from this gathering," right, from this group, from this community. And it uses the word from amongst this community. It uses the same word toch. So what? So we still don't have the number 10, but it refers to Korach's group, Korach's band as Edah, right? I don't know how to translate it exactly, a group, a community, whatever. We use the word Edah. And guess what? We have somewhere else that the word Edah is used. When in discussing the spies that Moses sent to scout out the land of Israel, they are also called an Edah. And guess how many there were? One for each tribe. There were 12, right? But two of them did not try to dissuade the people. That was Kalev and Yehoshua. So how many are left in the Edah Hara, in the bad group? There are 10 left. Malahala Nasara, Afkanasara. So if Edah means 10, and Korach's group was also an Edah, so that must have been 10. And in Korach's group, we use the word amongst the group, and we use that same word for sanctifying God amongst the people of Israel. So we carry forward the idea of 10. Okay. So it seems a little kind of tenuous connection for something that has really taken hold. If you ask anybody in the street, right, how many people are required for a group for congregational prayer, everybody knows it's 10, right? But it's the and as with many things, I mean, it's certainly possible that that's just a well-known thing that they're trying to find a hook for. So it's not not necessarily that this is truly, how they figured out it should be 10. It could be the tradition is 10, and this is the hook for it. Ein osin Mama Moshe Pachas Sorry, you do this sitting and standing ritual at a funeral without 10. So why not? Like, there doesn't seem to be anything having to do with sanctification here, unlike the liturgy and the other things we mentioned. Since part of the ceremony is to announce, like, stand, dear one, stand, and sit, dear one, sit. Batsir me'asara love arachara. Less than 10, it's not like appropriate. That doesn't really like answer it for me. I don't really get why, what that has to do with it. Yeah, Rashi tries to explain it. I don't really understand what he's saying either. Rashi says, "Love or heart, it's not appropriate latriach shaliach l'kach to go to the trouble of the ceremony, like Ros and Yikarim, and to call them dear ones. What's left over for other? I don't really get how the Gemara answers this. But also, I don't really know what the ceremony was, so it's a little hard to know. So we mentioned things that need a minyan are the bracha made by mourners and by grooms. My birchas avelim, what is the mourner's blessing? Birchas rechava. These are the blessings that are read in the plaza, right? So so after a funeral, the mourners would go home and people would come to the house and congregate around the house. And there was a bracha made that blesses God who pays the just reward. Okay, so that was a bracha that was made at this time, and that's clearly a sanctification, right? There's a bracha there. Rav Yitzchak said, "Birchas avelim basara," the bracha of the mourners. This bracha has to be with 10 people, not counting the mourners themselves. Birchas chasanim, the wedding blessings, basara, also has to be with 10. There, the wedding party can be counted as part of the minyan. What I mentioned before, the benching, the bracha after meals, also to use the name of God in that introduction requires 10. Since you're going to use God's name, we shall all let us all bless God. You don't invoke God's name without, again, the sanctification linked to the group of 10. Now, we said that assessing property for the temple, and it has to be 9 plus a coin, and assessing the value of a person is the same. Where do you get that from? Amar Shmuel, Asar Kohanim Ksuvim B'Parsha, because the word Kohen is mentioned 10 times in that section of the Torah that describes how the Kohen assesses the property and the person pays, and it uses the word Kohen very liberally 10 times. So Chad L'Gufe. So I mean, it has to use it at least once to tell you that the Kohen has to be involved. But what about the other 9? V'chad L'Me'ute. One second. Yeah, this appears to be a better. We leave that out. So Chad L'Gufe. So one, it has to tell you the coin at least once, and what are the other 9 times to tell you that there have to be 9 other people. So it's a little weird. It's like the word coin appearing multiple times includes non-coining, right? But the fact that, like, how else is it going to tell you there's 10 people? Well, could just say there have to be 10 people, but that's not the Gemara style. The mentioning, the coin. So one time, there has to be for sure at least a coin. But the reason that we're taking that it mentions it multiple times tells you there have to be 10 people altogether. But one of them can be the coin, and at least one of them has to be a coin. Vida, what's the Oh yeah, so it continues to say then, and what are the other 9 times that it says coin? Have a miud achar miud. That's an exclusion following an exclusion. So this is one of the rules of hermeneutics of Torah, explaining this whole style of explanation of Torah laws. If you have one word that is exclusionary followed by another word that is exclusionary, the second one is taken to mean expansionary. Okay, so the first coin means can only be a coin, but then when it kind of circumscribes who can the other people be, and it keeps saying coin, that is to be understood as including anybody more than just a coin. So that's how you get Tisha Yisraeli Mechad coin, 1 coin and 9 regular people. So the Gemara says, wait, you could say Ema Chamisha coin and Chamisha Yisraeli. Maybe there's 10 times the word coin. The first one is exclusionary, meaning only a coin. The second one is expansionary, meaning could be anybody. But then the next one, we start again. It'd be exclusionary, expansionary, exclusionary, expansionary. So you'd end up with 5 coinim and 5 regular people. So Morris is kasha. Yeah, good question. We don't have a good answer for why we're not taking it that way, but this is still the rule: 1 coin and 9 other people. Now, the last thing in the mission of Adam Kayotzevan, praising a person is the same. So Adam Mikadosh. You can't do that, right? I mean, you can say I'm giving someone's value, right? And there's a certain prescribed value. You may recall that an adult male is worth I can't remember X shekel, adult female is Y shekel, child is less, and whatever that's given. But you can't say I want to give Stan Dubin's value, right? And how much is Stan Dubin worth? So the Torah says anybody's worth. Like, that's what you mean to do is say, this many dollars. But I can't say I can't say I want to give Stan Dubin's personal actual worth. There's no such concept. The answer is Amar Rabbi Avo, Ba'omer Damai Alai. So you can actually, or Yavo says you can't actually say that. You can't actually say my personal market value I want to donate to the temple. And how do you do that? To Tanya, the Brisa says, if you say I want to donate my personal value, so we see what value will you bring on the slave market, right? That's your personal marketable value. And the Eved is kosher karkos. So all right, so now we know. Now we've said that you can do that, right? That you can donate a person's market value, but where do you get the idea it has to be with 10 people, right? What's the source for that? Eved iskash l'karkos. Slavery and land value are linked. Dichsiv, v'isnachaltem oson livnechem acharechem l'rashes osa. It says about non-Jewish slaves that you can pass them on as an inheritance to your estate, to your heirs, same as land, right? So just as land is meant to be kept in the family, so slaves are meant to be kept in the family. I will say this without comment on the moral, issues of slavery. Clearly, this was in a different time, but it's still hard to read. Nonetheless, this linkage establishes, just as evaluating property donated to the temple requires 10, as we saw from the 10 appearances of the word Kohen, that applies as well through this linkage to the evaluation of a person, because evaluating a person is how do you do that as if you were selling yourself as a slave. Okay, so we've got the bottom of the page. I guess we'll stop at this Mishnah, and David will up tomorrow.
Thank you, Doc.
All right, have a good